everyone. Thank you for joining us today at this Tech in Asia and AWS session. I'm Rohana Wood, the Marketing Manager with Accelerating Asia, an early stage VC fund, and I will be your host for this panel. So first of all, before we get started, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to join this session. We want this to be as interactive as possible and to make sure you get some of the information and key takeaways you're looking for throughout the session. So as a moderator, I find it's always good to get an idea of what the audience is looking for and who you are. So please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat, tell us who you are, where you're based, a little bit about yourselves, your startup, your company, and what you're looking to get out of from today. We will also have time for Q&A at the end of the session. So please drop any questions you have down in the Q&A section below, and we will try to get our panelists to answer them. Now, on to today's topic, all about how early stage startups can solve and develop tech that address public sector and government challenges. This topic is one that I'm especially interested in. Before I joined Accelerating Asia, I worked for a public policy organisation that sat at the intersection of business, innovation, startups and governments. And we at Accelerating Asia have also seen firsthand the range and diversity of startups that are emerging across Asian markets and solving traditional public sector challenges or working with governments across key industries, including healthcare, education, waste management, and more. We've also seen some of the blocks that early stage companies face when bidding for government contracts, working with government, and also establishing themselves. So enough about me. I'm really excited to be here with our panelists who are specialists in this area and to talk about early stage startups. So first of all, let me welcome Justin Tan, the co-founder of TwinLogic. Next, we have Clifford Tan, the VP of International at Amelie. And finally, Samuel Harris, who is the AWS Regional Public Sector Startup Lead for APG. So first of all, thank you all so much for your time and taking the time to talk with us today and to share your expertise. Before we dive in depth into the topic, just a reminder to the audience, please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat and drop any questions you have in the Q&A. I think let's start with a bit of context setting. I'd love to hear a little bit more about what you do and your involvement in the ecosystem, as well as how you fit into the public sector topic as well. So first of all, Justin, so from TwinLogic as a co-founder, can you share a little bit about what it is that you do, where you see current opportunities and trends as well in the ecosystem?
Right. Hi everyone. Thanks for joining this session to hear me speak. So I'm from TwinLogic. From the name of the company, so you can guess that we are a digital twin solutions company. So in essence, what we do is we organize data from a built environment into the built environment itself, a digital built environment, and providing the data to asset owners to better make better decisions by organizing the data for them in a way that's useful, right? So that's in a nutshell what we do. So we are in the built environment space. So obviously I'm going to be talking about it from this particular perspective. So as a startup, I think inevitably our focus is on innovation, right? Because if everything is too mainstream, it'll be too difficult for us to compete. There are too many established companies out there that would be offering the same kind of solution. So if you think about innovation, in general, innovation has a direct inverse relationship with how risk adverse our customers are, and a direct relationship with how much innovation is the differentiating factor for their business, right? So from a real estate perspective, I would have to say that customers are generally very highly risk adverse, and they do not see technology as so much of a differentiating factor. So for as far as innovation is concerned, we really see the public sector taking a lot of leadership in this space. We see the recent budget announcement for this year, where digitization of buildings and BIM technology is one of the focus areas. We see BCA adding BIM and digital twin as part of the new enhanced green map, and we see a lot of grants and support to companies that would like to apply for this to help them get the project started and take away some of the risk from our customers. So actually, I do think that the government has been pretty good for us in that sense. just one extra point though. So when talking about grants, right? I think grants and so on, at least for the context here in Singapore, from a government perspective, I can see them putting a lot of constraints and caveats as far as dispersing the grant is concerned. And I can understand why they do this, right? Because after all, they're spending taxpayers' money. From the company's perspective, it sort of feels like an issue because there's so many hoops to jump through just to get access to the grant. I don't know whether it's intended or unintended, right? But one of the consequences of this, for myself at least, I feel, is that it helps us to weed out a lot of the less serious projects, put it this way, right? And it forces us and the customer to really think about what we want to get out of the project. And in this way, we sort of become, the government teaches us how to fish instead of giving us the fish, right? And that I really appreciate that aspect of it. So yeah, that's what we see so far.
Great. And Clifford, what about you? So as VP International for Amelie, can you tell us a little bit about your role and what you do?
Yeah, thanks, Rana. So I'm very lucky to be part of Amelie. I'm part of the co-founding team right at the beginning of the company foundation back in 2019. And we are in a very exciting space of the gut microbiome. So if you look into what's going on in the life sciences world, the gut microbiome really is the most trending space in this area. And where the opportunity lies for us is that there's a huge gap between what's happening in the West and what's happening here in Asia. So coming from the genetics background myself, we understand and we see that there are differences between different populations. And here in Singapore, it's very unique in our population of multi-ethnicities. And even if you look at the panelists today, we're all from multiple different places. And the gut microbiome is possibly, it helps to link all of us up in terms of the environment, in terms of the food that we eat. So from my role here, we're looking to expand across the region. We fly the Singapore flag very proudly of what we're trying to do here. And so, if I were to share some of Justin's experiences with the government in the beginning, and I know this is what this platform is about, for us to, as a startup, to ensure that we were able to move quickly enough, we had to make sure that we had a balance of both private and public partnerships as well. So we were privately funded, but at the same time, we work very closely with the governments to make sure that we plug into the various ecosystems and a lot of research collaborations that we have engaged, firstly in Singapore and now moving across the up the causeway to Malaysia as well as some other regions as well. So there's a lot of opportunity, but it also means there's a lot of work to be done, and there's a lot of red tape, and there's a lot of regulations and bureaucracy that we have to try and overcome.
And Samuel, I think most of us are pretty familiar with AWS, but we're probably not familiar specifically with your role in the public sector engagement side of things. So can you tell us a little bit about your role and the programs you offer?
Yeah, thanks, Rahana, and thanks everyone for joining in today and dealing with webinar fatigue and attending. I hope you find today useful. I'm already finding it very useful. I've learned that if you need to deal with grants and procurement, talk to Clifford, talk to Justin. They know what they're talking about. But yeah, so I sit in the public sector team here in Singapore, covering Asia Pacific and Japan. The program specifically that I'm very excited to talk about today and the work that it's doing is AWS Startup Ramp, which is a startup virtual accelerator for public sector focused or public sector interested startups. Public sector might be a little bit of a internal messaging. So let me just kind of dive a little bit into what that means for you guys in the audience. So education, government, healthcare, local government, smart city, non-profit tech, regulation tech, all of these areas where government customers are your customers. How you deal with those nuances of engaging with public sector, whether that's grants, whether that's procurement, whether that's data sovereignty, data security. The program is designed to walk you through and help you scale your business as you come face to face with these opportunities and, to Clifford's point, sometimes challenges. So the program is there, but the community of startups that we're bringing into that program and are working with is what we're really excited about. We have 2 on the call today, but hopefully, we'll have many, many more after this session.
Great. And I think that's really interesting what you say about how the public sector fits into this as well, because it does come in a range of different ways. So I think that's probably a good segue to the next question. So Clifford, to start with you, can you share with us what you think are some of the current opportunity trends for startups and entrepreneurs within the public sector market? Are there any specific industries that you think there's an opportunity to do something in, or yeah?
I think it's difficult to package the entire public sector into one view or one scene. The thing about Singapore or any other government, especially in the healthcare system, is that there are different stakeholders, and so I think it's important to really understand which part of the problem you're trying to solve, and that's absolutely key. I think over the past year and a half, if you walk into a government body and you knocked on a door and you had a transformation solution, or you had an efficiency solution, the response would be, is this COVID related, right? Over the past year and a half. And I think that's taken a lot of bandwidth away from their capabilities to accept other solutions and ideas. So I think where the opportunity lies in 2022 is that if we can get past and God forbid Omicron, right? So whatever happens beyond that, if you can get back to your normality, there's been a lot of probably a lot of projects that have been delayed that we can now go back to. And look, this is I can only share with you what we have done in our little ecosystem as far as digital transformation or delivering efficiencies in the fintech or health tech space with the insurtech, for example. Everyone's trying to build for example, databases that can be shared across different platforms. So I think it's very important for us to have partnerships instead of competing with one another. I think it kind of makes sense. It's a small market. We should all try and see how we can plug into building up a stronger and more coherent and complete package to the various governments. But my advice would be make sure, don't beyond the technology standpoint, it all goes back to the simple business standpoint view of what problem are you trying to solve. Go back to that core fundamental question, and then the rest of it are delivery tools and methods that can be that can always continuously be improved and built upon.
Great, and I guess Justin, just touching off on some of those points as well. At your end, how have you seen some of the trends that have come up in the last 12 months? Obviously, COVID is the big one, but there's others as well. How have you seen that impact the work that you do? And where do you see some of the opportunities in the future as well?
Right. So I have a slightly but similar experience with Clifford. So I do think COVID has taken a lot of the bandwidth from the conversation over the past couple of years, right? For us, it's actually not bad. It's kind of weird to say that COVID is not bad, but what it does for us in the sense that it helps to shake up the real estate market, right? Real estate has always been a very traditional industry. The REITs are very risk adverse. We see a lot of competition between developers and landlords around non-tech related areas, like who have access to the nearest train station, who has got a better building structure, who is a more comfortable place, so on and so forth, right? Less technology related. But COVID really changed the way people are viewing spaces today. The way a landlord has to deliver a space to a tenant has completely changed. How the tenants are going to use the space, how the tenants are going to find more users for the same space, right? It really forces the landlords to start thinking differently, which is why for us, when we start talking to customers, we realize that, okay, the idea of digitalization, the idea of remote monitoring, the idea of contract-based outcomes, these are all things that suddenly seems to gain a little more interest. Not exactly to the point where, let's spend money on this, right? Investment is still very much ROI driven, but definitely I do think that there's a change in mindset in the area. But Clifford is right. We do have to get out of this phase, right? There's plenty of oversupply in the market right now. A lot of the tenants are not renewing their leases, right? And then for our customers, for the landlords and developers, they are the ones who's going to feel the pinch right now. That I have all this space that I planned 5-6 years ago, right? Real estate is a very slow to react industry. So 5-6 years ago, I started planning all these spaces. Suddenly, right now, they are in surplus. So what do I do with them? So we do have to get back to some form of normality. But yeah, I do think that there's definitely spaces in the whole built environment space right now. And you can see the government actually taking a leadership role in this. Yeah.
Great. And I guess moving on, because you've all obviously worked on government contracts and had a lot of diverse stakeholders who you deal with through both of your startups. So can you tell us a little bit about any advice that you give to an early stage company who is starting out in this sector or looking to win that first contract or deliver a first client for a public sector challenge? So Clifford, if you could start.
Yeah, I think what is evident here is that there are multiple layers of people that you speak with in the stakeholder level. So it is very, I think, it's critical that you do have champions who believe in you, especially as a startup. The situation in Singapore, and I'm sure this is shared, Justin or with other fellow startup kind of champions here, is that it is very difficult in Singapore to be a startup because you almost feel as if you're going against the government who usually don't look as kindly as you because you don't have the credibility. And all of us being new and young and even if you bring in key opinion leaders, you need to prove yourself first and foremost. So start small, find little pilot projects that you can build a successful business case around, and then from there make sure that you have the proper channels that are championing you. And a lot of times when you speak to various parties, and then you have to know who really is the decision maker and who is the right kind of advocate for you out at the different levels. Because it does, you do not, the last thing in the world you want to do is to get your project stuck in, legal hell or bureaucratic hell, and it goes after, and it just loops around, and the next thing 2 years have passed. And as in the startup stage, all of us have very short runways. So you need to have, so make sure you build little short, success stories. And then from there, you kind of hope for, for a bigger case study.
And Justin, what about you? Do you have any tips or insights into startups who are starting on this journey?
Right. So just now I mentioned that the public sector in my space is taking the lead in terms of pushing innovation, right? A bit less risk adverse compared to the industry. However, they are very risk adverse when it comes to procurement, right? And the whole process of procurement and security and the hoops they need to jump through just to get a small project across, that's where they're super risk adverse in. So this is where we actually find a lot of help from partners. Partnership, I think, is really one of the biggest thing that a startup need to have, because there are so many things that we cannot do ourselves. So many things. So for example, simple things like getting some ISO certification, right? You need to get some certification in order to start work on a particular project. As a startup, resources are limited. So you still have to ask yourself, okay, do I spend my resources to get this certificate or this prerequisite before I have this job? Do I invest in this? What if I don't get the job, right? So that investment decision has to be made. But however, if you have a partner who already is the main contractor for this particular project, and if you are able to provide a particular value to this partner, they could help you to sort of like hide what you don't have under their umbrella, because they will cover the overall insurance, the track record, the experience that's needed to get the project. So you hide under this particular umbrella, and then once you get the project, that's when you can safely invest in the required certificates or the minimum requirements that you need to get a particular project. So I do feel I got a lot of support from partners. I think AWS is a great partner in this space as well, because AWS is one of the approved cloud providers for the government sector. Right? So Azure, AWS, the few of them are. So AWS is one of the approved ones. So when we deploy our solution over AWS, we can, in a way, the public sector can kind of like confidently know that as far as the infrastructure is concerned, there's a certain level of capability, there's a certain level of security, there's a, it's approved, right? So the less thing that needs to be approved by the government sector, the better. So having AWS as on our corner is definitely useful as well.
Yeah, and on the AWS front, I guess, Samuel, over to you. So you offer a lot of different services, and like Justin said, you're quite familiar with the space and the market. When do you think is the right time for a startup to seek opportunities in this sector? Like, I know we've seen with our early stage companies, the upfront resource is definitely like a blocker. So I guess, where do you see, or what advice would you give on that as from a stage perspective?
Yeah, so I mean, if you kind of go into the entrepreneur mind, right, it's always about the next customer. So it's the first customer, and then it's the first 10 customers, and then how do we get to our first 100 customers? And I think there's really a right time to start that journey of engaging with public sector organizations. To Justin's point, at the start, it might be very hard to go into that procurement process, but there is ways, distribution channels and licensing channels to get into that. I think what's the really powerful piece is, am I really diving deep into that niche solution area that I can then work with the government on, that they really want to deploy? Am I providing the same service that 10 very, very large SaaS companies already provide, that have the compliance, that have the ability to interact with government? Or am I providing something on top of that? I think if you feel very comfortable about that, it's the right time to engage public sector. And with AWS, we have the program, and we have the customers in public sector that we can connect you to, share experiences from. And also on the procurement side of things, actually help you meet some of those compliance, right? We have a world-class cloud infrastructure. We meet a lot of those ISO and SOC compliances. We have local compliances that we meet as well. So it does help you sort of, in a more agile way, meet some of those requirements to engage. So start early, engage with us, engage with partners, I think is a really good way to think about it, as long as you have that niche solution area that you can see government looking for, or healthcare or education.
If I could just add a couple of things to Justin's point, I think the importance of partners are very, very critical, especially at the early stage. Once you establish a business plan and you mapped out your entire value chain, you realize that as a small company, I mean, it's impossible to fill up. It'll take a long time, right? And again, as a startup, if you're operating on seed funding, you have 12, 24 months of runway. So the only way to try and shortcut this entire system is to find partners who have done it before, and also who have made mistakes before, and who will be able to share with you experiences like, don't do this, do that. And you got to be creative in how you engage these partners, because you are also nobody, and so be creative in creating that whole ecosystem and the value chain upwards and downwards. And Sam's absolutely correct. Having strong partners like AWS helps to give you a little bit of credibility, because hell, if AWS believes in you, and seriously, if they make a call to one of the partners, either in the government or in the adjacency space, then I think it's going to be much more helpful.
Yeah, and I guess that's an opportunity to also dive in a little bit into the next conversation I wanted to have around some partnerships and opportunities and challenges. So obviously, Amelie, you guys are a gut microbiome hub. You work with a lot of different partners through different healthcare systems, and as we know, healthcare is one of the more complex industries out there. So how did you introduce and launch products into the public sector market? Was it through those partnerships? Do you have any examples that you could share with us?
Yeah, to be honest, when we first started up, the first thing that we did was to build a strong business case to bring in a very world-class advisory board, and that allowed us to really use that network to talk to other institutions, research institutions. So before we got into any commercial products, we wanted to make sure that we had a strong research foundation. And the gut microbiome really is, about collecting as much data as you can and drawing insights from your bacterial strains and how that affects ultimately your health or wellness. And from those, you can draw insights to eventually go into therapeutics and a lot of other different products. But going into conversations with different research institutes, using your existing network to see if there's a concordance or at least a convergence of, maybe they are stuck at something that we can do better and we can feed information from them, or maybe they have started a project but they can't move forward because of lack of funding or speed or whatever it is. So we kind of helped to pull that slot, but we knew what was missing in the environment. And for example, we built Southeast Asia's first stool bank, and nobody had done that before. That gave us some kind of credibility. And yes, Mal, it's what we did. It was it's
a niche.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm sure it's probably quite a big one as well.
Yeah. A lot of jokes there, but it's a interesting topic. But by building that lab, building the infrastructure behind it, and having that bank, people could see that we were serious. So you have to put your money behind, what your proposition is. It's not just a story. And then when they see that you actually have something, but in order to do that, we had to build campaigns. So again, like I said, it's this whole ecosystem. How do you get donors in? How do you, get your people to be the experts in the gut microbiome space? And then how do you plug into all the different credible institutes, the NTU or the NUHs? And those really, basically you don't look at the product itself, or it's just a microbiome, but what can it be used for? Then you go look, you look down the value chain and says, oh, wow, there are, people are finding therapeutics in, for example, the gut-brain axis, and so that goes into spaces of autism or Parkinson's, and then realizing that there are also other studies out in the West on cardiology with regards to this, and all of a sudden your world becomes pretty wide, right? And then you begin to fulfill a need because people are needing your data, and you can help them to accumulate this data. And again, this goes back to what I was saying about solving a problem. So you must find out what the problem is for the network, and understand the ecosystems, who's doing what. And it's really hard to knock on a door and say, look, we have this solution, and then they say, oh, well, that's interesting. But if you already know that they are looking for you, for that solution, then it's it's a natural fit.
Yeah, I guess that relates around to like product launch and getting that first step into product iteration a little bit as well. So Justin, at TwinLogic, how did you refine some of your solutions for the market and enable government to see the value in that as well once you had an initial blueprint?
Right. So for us, I think as a startup, we are inherently at a disadvantage, because when it comes to resources, track record, capability, I think it's difficult to prove that you have those at the startup stage. But what you definitely have, and as an advantage over the other competitors, is that you have the agility, you have flexibility, you have the speed of thought as an organization, right? And that is, and I always believe in really making whatever you have as an advantage really stand up, right, and really focus on those. So since we don't have we're at a disadvantage for those areas, let's make sure that the areas that we have advantage in, we really focus on them. So for us, we really take the chance to speak with as many people as possible, whether it's a partner or a customer or even a competitor if we have to. Right, any chance we have to talk to somebody, we will talk to somebody, and we allow ourselves to always constantly change our positioning so that it kind of fits what the market requires. So talking about this, right, we have changed our positioning so much over the past year. Looking back 8 months ago, and what we are focused on, and what we are so sure that this is the right way to position our solution. Right, when we look at it right now, it seems like, okay, that seems to be wrong. Right, so really assuming that somebody else we're looking to knows something that we don't really helps us to do this. So for example, in this whole digital twin space, right, it's not a new concept. In fact, it's a pretty established concept, and everybody we speak with already knows what a digital twin is. But what we do realize that everybody we speak to have a different idea of what a digital twin is. So for some, they think of it as just a way to visualize data, right? And then for others, they combine all sorts of buzzwords together, talking about AI and machine learning and predictive maintenance and simulation, and all not and without knowing exactly how to get that to happen, right? So on one end, you'll be asking yourself, why do I even need to invest in this solution if it's just a data visualization? On the other hand, you'll be thinking, how do I even get to all these buzzwords, right? So for us, we found a sweet spot in the middle right now where we focus on just helping our customers make better decisions by making data available and organized for them. That's all. Really simple stuff. And we have a very clear roadmap on how to get there, right? And we don't jump into the pool with all the others in this space who screams about machine learning and AI and all this stuff right now, because I don't think our customers are ready for those. So we really focus on what is doable, what is demonstrable, what looks possible right now, and then focus on those first. But that's now, right? Maybe 2 months later, I'll tell you something completely different. And just one more point to add. Sorry, just one more point to add. For us as in our team, we keep we sort of have this working style where we believe that we change as much as we can before we start to ship something. But when we're going to ship something, we listen to no one, right? And then focus on shipping it out. And then when that happens, then the whole cycle starts again. So in a way, we had sort of like an internal delineation between me, who is the customer fronting guy who tries to squeeze as much what customers wish list into our solution, and then the development guy, right, who just focuses on what can I do right now with the resources I have. So we have a healthy sort of like delineation between me and him in a way whereby we try and keep this cycle like a clockwork, right? We listen as much and then we stop listening, and then listen as much and stop listening. It might not be useful for everybody, but that's something that we found works for us. Yeah.
Yeah, and Samuel, that product iteration is something you guys at AWS must see quite a lot, including with startups in your programs. So how do you see AWS's platform and AWS is helping that as well? So working with startups as they scale and grow, what are some of your experiences in that space?
Yeah, so I mean, I think we've talked about it a lot, but the last 2 years were very transformative in terms of what people around the region demanded from their public sector entities and agencies in terms of remote learning, personalized at-home healthcare, smarter buildings, smarter cities to make people a bit more accountable. And that demand of new services and sort of more friendly citizen services has fallen to startups more often than not, because to both of these gentlemen's point, the cost of failure is much lower relatively in a smaller, leaner organization than a very bureaucratic public sector entity. So we've sort of been working with startups on that. You know, how do you bring machine learning into a data set that you've had for 20 years? How do you think about making learning more personalized and more remote, and using the AWS platform to iterate very, very quickly? That agility comes very easily for us because of the range of services and the pace of innovation that we bring to our platform, but it also empowers public sector through startups to think about that in a more free way than perhaps they have in the past. I think one tidbit, which, you know, off of Justin's point, is as a startup, there's this really tough balance between iterating exactly what the customer wants and getting too deep into that and individualizing your solution for every single customer that wants something. So there is this balance between listening to the customer, but also making it viable for you as a business, both technically and financially. So how you iterate at scale across your whole stack instead of doing it for every single agency is very hard, because they're the ones with the money, they're the ones that are demanding what you should build, but also making sure that you can scale. So that's a little bit of a balance. And I think that kind of DevOps culture that we try and push and startups are really focused on, you know, helps in that respect. So the program is there to kind of programmatize that technical support through AWS Startup Ramp.
Can I add one more point, sorry, regarding AWS support? And I do feel the support from AWS. Sorry? Sorry, okay, yeah, right. So what I wanted to say is, okay, so for our business, for our solution, we thrive on the customer's belief that they can gain something from data, right? If they believe that data is key for their business, if they believe that data helps them to get an edge over their competitors, right? Our solution will thrive, because our solution in a simple way describe it, we organize the data in a way that is usable, right? But you need to believe that data is useful first. You need to believe that you have the data, right? So this is one area that I really appreciate AWS for championing this, because their business, I don't see AWS as a cloud service provider. I see them as a data solutions provider, right? They're helping us to evangelize to our customers the whole idea of data ownership, making data available to everybody in the organization, having a common data environment to bring all the data into one single space. All this stuff that they're championing works for us, because the more you believe in what AWS has to offer and then teach you and tell you, the more I can come in and say, look, you have all this data right now. How do I help you to make sense of all this data? So this is a good partnership for us, and it brought us to a few places where we have very interesting conversations with. So I really appreciate it. Yeah, just wanted to add it there.
Great. And Clifford, what's your experience with that, seeing as we're talking about the AWS program and that partnership? How have you found that?
Yeah, it's been extremely critical to our expansion and growth. When we start, it's when we look at it, first of all, as Justin said, it's not there's multi-layered here, right? It's when we started off with a physical server room, and we started, and we did it traditionally, and then when the thing about the gut microbiome is that it's a very data heavy kind of a solution. So every microbiome consists of about 1 terabyte of data, and so when you start putting in a lot of these data, I mean, you'll need effectively a huge server farm to even to just store and the computation requirements are extremely heavy as well. So moving it up to cloud, and now really architecting it in the future for analysis and in trying to create a data lake, and how we link up various different types of data, that's absolutely critical. Now, talk about the relationship, of course, what Justin has said, just being in the same room as other partners within the AWS partner ecosystem. It's important, and also as we have experience from Justin as well, they can bring us to other kind of conversations that we would probably not have been able to ourselves. So, that fit again, which I alluded to, is very important, and not just between AWS and ourselves, but they can bring in, a lot of experiences, outside from the US and everywhere else.
Okay, great. We're about to start the Q&A in a second. So if you do have any questions, feel free to put them into the Q&A section. You can also put them into the chat, or you can DM me as well, and we'll try to get to them in a few minutes. But before we dive into Q&A, I guess one final question or one tip. Can each of you give me a tip or a key takeaway, something that you've learned in working with government and public sector organizations, or a tip for startups looking to get into the B2G sector? So let's, Samuel. Okay, yeah. Let's go to Clifford. Is there a delay?
There's a slight delay, but I think we got it. A tip to share going into government or B2G, right?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So yeah, I can go first. So I think I touched on it already, but just be very, very eloquent about what solution you're trying to provide and what the impact to that organization that solution provides. Once you have that, and to the points spoken about, iterate once those demands change slightly, will put you in a good position. After that, find your distribution, whether it's partners that can help you bid, whether it's partners that can help you expand, whether it's technology providers that can help you iterate and innovate. It's super important. But just be very eloquent about that solution that you're focused on, and then find out who it is that is looking for that solution. So maybe that's 3 tips, but I'll throw them all in there.
Why not? And Clifford, what about you?
I think you have to appreciate and understand the fact that the health authorities are very risk averse, as Justin has mentioned. And we're dealing with a part of the government that has a mandate to save lives, for example, right? So that would always be the key KPI for them. Every other thing, as far as improving efficiency, or connecting different parts of the government, increasing communications or any kind of transformation activities really operates under the umbrella of, doing the right thing or saving lives. So within that context, make sure, as I have said, make sure that you, what Sam, has said, is just make sure that you understand what problem you're trying to solve and how are you doing it differently and faster and cheaper than what the incumbent way of doing it is. And if you don't have a good answer for that, then you probably don't have a right solution.
And Justin, what about you?
Right. So kind of related to what the previous two gentlemen said. For me, because I believe in the role, the support of partners, the whole partnership and the whole ecosystem, hunting as a pack kind of mindset. I guess my advice would be to be very focused on being unique, right? And I don't mean, when I say unique, I don't mean like in a very coy or condescending manner, right? Like how to be successful or just by being successful. There's no such thing, right? So and if you go to Google your idea, if it's fantastic idea, Google, I'm sure you'll find 100 hits of somebody who had the exact same idea as you, right? So it's really, really tough to be unique. So, but when I say to be unique, right, I don't mean, I mean being unique in very, very small ways, right? Because as a startup, you can find profitable in things that other people don't find profitable in, right? Which means that you can do something which somebody else either find too expensive to do or too troublesome to do. Not that they cannot do it, but they don't feel like doing it, right? So finding that thing that allows you to fit into a partner's solution where they think that, okay, rather than me doing it myself, since you can do it and you seem to be able to do something, why don't you do it for me, right? And to be humble about the whole approach, right? You don't have to be the biggest voice in the room. You don't have to be the key platform that everybody uses, right? But just finding the right ways to be unique, and then from there, I'm sure that, and if you hustle, keep talking, keep refining your solution, I'm sure you'll get to a place where you fit nicely into one solution and let that one solution take you to the rest. Right? The first one is the most difficult. Once you get it, I think it's more downhill. Yeah.
Rana,
Okay,
if I could just add a couple of things to what Justin has said. I mean, so it is true what people say, right? Your first solution will never be the ideal one. So you got to keep working at it to version 5, 7, 8, 9, 10. But if you don't start off with version 1, you will never get there. So I've never heard of a startup that has been able to succeed with the first version or the second. So the other thing is about building momentum and being nimble, as again what Justin has said, because we live in a very competitive environment. By the time you create something and you look around and it works, the next thing you know, there's somebody else trying to do the same thing as you. So you want to be as fast and build a certain momentum that whenever somebody reaches where you are, you're already at the next step. Or maybe you've decided to create a new tangent line. So that forward thinking and side thinking and back, looking back, that 360 view of everything in your environment is also important. Looking at what's happening in the West, but at the same time, understanding that it's not a solution that necessarily will work here, so you need to localize it or create your own solution. And you don't have always to look west, where I think sometimes the solutions come from us first.
Great. Okay, so we're going to dive into some questions. I've had a few come through. If you do have any questions, like I said, drop them in the Q&A or the chat. Our first questions are for Justin and Clifford. So Justin, if we start with you, how easy or difficult is it to get support and grants from public sector organizations or governments in your cases?
For me, I think if you start off the right expectations, it's not too tough, right? I feel that it's tough if you get disappointed easily. Okay, put it this way. Because I was lucky in my job before this startup. I worked a lot of government officials. I helped different companies trying to get grants. So I sort of like have a clue as to the process and all this stuff. So I'm not disillusioned, right? So as long as you come into the process knowing that, right, what you need is an actual fit to the industry, right? You don't think of the grant as a quick way to get some money, right? Or a quick way to tell a customer, why don't you just do this with me? I'll get the grant for you, right? As long as you don't come in with that mindset, you don't get disappointed, right? It is not difficult, because I feel that there's more government grants looking for good projects than good projects looking for government grants, right? So if you can come to a government, whichever sector that is more aligned with your area of interest, right? You go to the government sector and you have a customer in place. You have a customer first. You have already worked out with the customer. What is the thing that you want to build together with the customer? What's the thing that you want to transform? What's the new capability you want to build? You have those points ready, and when you talk to the government party or whoever is administrating the grant, right, you will tend to get better results, right? To be ready, to know what you're getting into, and that's my. I was lucky because my previous job I already knew the people in my sector, so I kind of like have an easy way to just pick up the phone and make a call. But I still do think that as long as you have a good project, you focus on learning how to fish and not asking for the fish, you will not get disappointed. Yeah, that's at least my perspective.
Yeah, and Clifford, what about yourself? What's your experience been with support and grants?
I think this is a bit of a catch-22 situation, because there is a lot of in Singapore, I think we're very lucky in the sense that there's a lot of support available. So first of all, you have to map out what's available there, because there are some that overlap, and some and some that if you take one, then you can't take the other fund. So you got to understand what the entire funding environment looks like with the various agencies. But that being said, you do not want to be in a situation where you're bogged down by administration, because getting a grant is again a catch-22. You'll be spending a lot of time writing papers, submitting reports, and in a startup, your time and your resources are extremely limited. So this is something that you have to really balance out, whether you really need it or whether you don't, and what time it comes. Whether you want to come in at an early kind of a POC stage, or later on when you're trying to do expansion, and the quantum of money that you need is also important. But for us, I look at it, a grant as more not so much for the money, which is nice, but more as a point of credibility and endorsement. But when you talk to other partners and you say, look, I have this grant, it adds a lot of weight for sure.
Yeah, and I guess, Samuel, another question we've had that has come through is about the AWS program. So specifically how it engages with the public sector. Can you just provide a little bit of detail on that?
Yeah, sure. So it's quite a new program. We launched it into the region in September. So as is the way with us at Amazon, we want to really work backwards from the customers, aka the startups that apply. We have a few ideas and a few initiatives that we're already doing, which namely are connecting startups to the public sector customers. One, in terms of hearing what they're looking for and what they're trying to deploy and procure, but also in terms of how they should be thinking about engaging with public sector organizations. So the procurement, the grants, the funding, the blockers of working with startups, having that kind of open channel of communication. We also want to connect investors to startups. So another big part of the program is this connection and this network of investors that we have, that these startups can then connect with, pitch to, and then hopefully drive that capital, which will give them more scope for innovation and more scope for adoption. Saying that, there's plenty more things that we want to do and plenty more things that we want to hear from our community that they will find useful. So I dropped my email in the chat box. If you'd like to join the program or tell me what we're not doing or what we are doing, please do. We always like to work backwards and hear from you guys on how we can iterate and improve the offerings.
Great. And another question that's come through is, do you think the public sector is opening to working with and listening to non-early stage as well?
I'm sorry, could you repeat it?
Did you hear that? Oh, sorry, there must have been a delay. So do you think the public sector is open to engaging and listening in with non-early stage startups, so those companies that are at a later stage?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, my advice here is even if you don't feel that you're ready at an early stage standpoint to talk to any government, be sure to go there and introduce yourself to make sure that you are put on the map. A lot of times you don't necessarily qualify to participate in any kind of a project, but make sure that you remind that you remain in the sort of in the mind space. So make sure that you're visible and keep whoever you're trying to. I mean, have a long-term vision of the partnership, right? You don't you don't get married after one date. So you don't want to go there and introduce yourself, say what you're trying to do, and then just keep coming back and giving updates, and make sure that you have progressed, right? Just continue to engage them, show that you have that you continue to grow and have built success, and show them what value that you can bring to them. And yes, for sure, they are probably going to be much more attuned to talking to you when you are. When you have all, the series of successes behind you as a late stage company.
Yeah, actually, I was about to say as well, as opposed to late stage, for sure. I think they prefer to talk to later stage startups. Sure. Yeah, right. So I think I guess my advice would be that, right, to talk to a customer first before talking to the government sector. Talk to a customer first. Scope out something in the customer. Make it as exciting as possible. Make sure that the customer is on this journey with you. Find that champion in your customer that is willing to go on this journey, because they have to do work as well to get the grant, right? The grant is not just the work on your side. The company themselves, the customer themselves needs to put in the effort to write out their part in that paper, their commitment to support this particular project, what kind of use case, what kind of end results they hope to get out. Because part of the grant, one of the requirements would be what is the capability that's been built. What is the returns that has been achieved, right? These are the things. So the customer needs to define that for you. So they have to do the work, right? So I find that once you have a customer behind you, it doesn't matter which company you are, the government will be excited because they are looking for more projects.
Yeah, Justin is a good point, because clearly the government does not want to be the first customer. So please do not do that. Okay, make sure you have built a nice little stable of customers first, and so that this is what we've done there, this is what we've done here, we've tested it, we find it, and here you are.
Absolutely. And just, sorry, Rahana, I want to add one thing is even within government, right, there are risk takers, there are innovation champions. So map them out as well. If there's specific people that you know in your network or have heard of that are willing to take risks within that sort of framework, there's many out there. So aligning to them and allying to them can be very, very powerful as well.
Yeah, I think finding allies is really important, and definitely something that Clifford and Justin also mentioned earlier as well. We've definitely seen startups who have a champion can do things a lot quicker. Okay, our next question is from Fadil in the chat. So when you become involved in a public sector or government project, how can you maintain a tight schedule while still providing a high quality product, considering it undergoes a very lengthy curatorial procedure? So Justin and Clifford, you look like you are both nodding in agreement on that one. So Clifford, if you wanted to go first.
I think this is a universal problem, regardless of who you're working with. I mean, we're always just, as a startup, I think it's when you trade away your weekends and your evenings, and that's just a price that's just gonna, and at some point you have to figure out how much you can do. And then it becomes, again, that balance of what resources you have and what kind of potential prospects that you want to try and attack. I don't know if anybody has an answer to this, because that whole work balance situation is really difficult. Or how do you prioritize your projects, right? And that's an internal discussion. Is this project more important than the other? Which one allows you to move on to the next stage of your, which one's more sensitive, for example, which one has, I think is that internal sense of prioritization. You sit here and say, okay, look, if we spend a lot of time writing these grant papers, we won't be able to talk to these guys. But at the same time, it becomes a chicken and egg thing. Without these smaller projects, then your grant maybe cannot proceed. So find that little balance again. How much time do you want to devote to anything? And that's no universal answer to that.
I have one tip though. So I think some of the some of the anguish behind delivering a project, right, can be solved if you start the project correctly. Okay, so humans in general find the path of least resistance, right? And it includes getting sales as well. Whatever gets me the sale in a better, not better, easier and faster manner, I'll just do it, right? Because it's a short-term gain, right? So startups tend to make the mistake of promising everything. I can do this. I'm sure, yeah, I can do this. One is doable. That is doable. Everything is doable because you just want to get the sale, right? So when you put too much of these promises on the table, you ended up putting yourself in a position where it looks like you had to deliver them or else, right? So and it's super difficult, right? Because as a startup, you are craving for resources, and then how do you justify letting something go, right? But having a good mix of what you are comfortable with promising and what, if you're not comfortable, just tell yourself to say no to it, right? Just say no to it, so that when the project actually comes and you're delivering stage, right, customers tend to be reasonable if their expectations are set correctly in the first place. They already know that this thing you already promised me is not doable, or it's going to take 6 months or whatever. At least you've set the stage, right? So I think a part of the anguish could be just removed if you have the discipline to just start the project correctly and just say yes to the things you're comfortable with saying yes to, and say no to things that you don't want to do, right? I think that is one thing that could help. Yeah.
Yeah, and a big part of that, sorry Clifford, is really understanding like the embedded cost in those decisions, right? If Justin as the CEO is in a room with the customer and says, yes, we can, deploy this new feature, and then the engineering team says that's going to cost me, this many man hours and this much in terms of time. You can have that understanding as an organization of how you can make that better, but also what that feels like. Then those conscious choices of engaging with new product iteration or tender response can be made more intelligently, because you know what the implications are for the organization. So whether that's deploying DevOps or whether that's thinking about what that means in terms of man hours is a really important factor.
Yeah, as a startup, I mean, it's if you have a small team, having a sales team that is also involved in product development, and they understand how that what's involved in delivery, that's very, again, very productive to have in the negotiations. And we always operate in the ethos of under promise and over deliver, and that's important. Again, Justin, yes, if I know I can deliver 100%, I'll just say I'll deliver 80%, because you never know. The thing about the tech world is that there are always hiccups. Something will happen. Your version doesn't work. The system shuts down. You don't know. Right, so there's just a lot of uncertainty here. So just over deliver if you can, but be aware of the costs and what's involved in building something.
And I guess before we wrap up, just a final ask for all of you, and something, maybe if you could tell me something you want to plug or how the audience could get in touch with you. So Clifford, do you want to start?
I'm sorry?
An ask for the audience. So if you have any asks you're looking for, partnerships, things you want to work with the Tech in Asia audience with, or how they can reach you to reach out with partnership opportunities.
Sure. I mean, we're always looking for critical strong partners, specifically in the space of the our everyone's looking for the same kind of people, actually, but in terms of building our technology, data scientists, we are a gut microbiome company. That's just our description, but it rests upon a foundation of data, right? So that's the core of what we want to build. So developers, everybody is what we're looking for, both as company partners or individuals as well. Alternatively, we are also, 2022 is one of the questions I saw. 2022. What's exciting for us is that I think we spent 2 years building a platform, and then now we are really looking at how to, commercialize them, commercialize the database in terms of outputs and also regional expansion. So any kind of partners in that thrust would also be something that we will be looking for. My email, I actually just somewhere in the chat space, I actually put my email in there.
Great. And Justin, what about you?
Right. So for us, we are in the built environment space. As I mentioned, partnership is really important for us. There are so many things that we cannot do. So And built environment is a huge space, from hospitality to commercial buildings to specialized infrastructure, right? So many different asset owners out there. So if there's anybody who has any interest in delivering solutions to this group of providers, or you have interesting solutions that share with us, I mean, we would certainly like to meet up with anybody who's interested, because we are a digital twin company. We thrive on having as much of the real world in the digital space as much as possible. So if anybody is delivering solutions in the real world and is interested in seeing if we can deliver something of the real world through a digital space, right, we definitely love to have that conversation, right? And I think I should include my email address into the chat somewhere. Yeah.
And Samuel, what about yourself?
Well, firstly, Rahana, thanks so much for moderating and being a fantastic host. Really appreciate you, and of course Justin and Clifford as the fellow speakers. Simple call to action: if you're a startup in this space, email me or apply for the program AWS Startup Ramp, and we'll be happy to connect and support you on this amazing journey that you're going on. So thanks again for everyone for their time.
Great, and I'm just going to follow up with my own ask as well, which links to Samuel's. We're currently scouting our next batch of investments, which we will be making in Q1, and we are a partner with AWS as well across a range of different programs. So if you are a startup pre-Series A looking for some investment, please reach out to me as well. That is all we've got time for today. Thank you so much to Tech in Asia and AWS, as well as our panelists, Justin, Clifford, and Samuel. I hope you learned something. I hope you're getting value and some insights about what it's like to work across the public sector. And hopefully we will see you at another one of these soon in the future.